All right, so the recording should be underway. All right, so welcome for coming to this installment of our AIEB call, the Azure Intelligent Edge Brief. Again, I'm Kevin Sullivan. I'm a Azure Edge Global Black Belt here at Microsoft. So I focus on all things Edge, which will typically is the focus of these calls. Today we have James Roland Jones presenting. He's Principal Program Manager. I believe James technically is the Azure Data Services side. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm on the Azure Data team. I'm working on Azure Arc for Azure Data Services. So that's my primary role here at Microsoft.
Awesome. Thanks, James. And so, like usual, we have a very simple agenda and then it's very compact, since I try as best I can to keep us to a strict 30 minutes from the top to the bottom of the hour. So that's my intention here today. I'll quickly go over the usual stuff, overview, and a couple little tidbits of news. I'll hand it over to James to take the majority of the time for the call today to focus on this, what I feel is one of the more exciting things that we started talking about here early November in the Ignite timeframe, and that's Azure Arc for Data Services. And so I'll let James give you a little bit more depth and dive into what that is and what that looks to hopefully do for us all here in the near future. Also, I've got myself and others on the line, so take Q&A as it comes in over the IM with Teams if you have questions, and we'll go from there. Just a couple of things, again, just the usual disclaimer. This is a 30-minute call, just specific to the Edge offering, and I'll talk about a little bit what we typically focus in on this call. The one big thing I just want to make sure we understand, and also I just, and James as well, that this is not a forum for NDA information, simply because I have this open to anybody and everybody that wishes to join. So folks are more than welcome from the outside, and there's no real possible way for me to understand if there are the proper NDAs in place to discussion such information. Therefore, we won't be able to discuss that on this call. So just keep that in mind. These calls are recorded, and I will post them at that AKA link, which will take you to a YouTube channel, which will have eventually this session as well as the dozen or so that we've done this last several months for you to go and review. All right, so a couple of quick news, not a whole lot of items since last time we spoke a couple of weeks ago, but my friends over, or our friends over at HPE, who, if you are an HPE customer, or even do anything with their hybrid cloud solutions, is one of our OEMs that offers an Azure Stack Hub set of solutions. They are kicking off a hybrid cloud summit. They're going to starting in January, dates for cities worldwide. The three that they have now locked down and announced are there. If you happen to be in one of those cities, great. Go check it out. It's a free session. I believe the agenda is usually typically would be a half day, to where you'll have both HPE folks concentrated on their hybrid cloud solutions, as well as folks such as myself and the Global Black Belt team. I know, I believe I am going to be assisting with the one in Houston and possibly the others. But essentially to talk about what our intelligent edge space, as well as and specifically what HPE has and can do to enhance what our offerings are, and work together on those. There are more cities pending. They just haven't been locked. That I believe that if you're interested in these, they'll have a schedule that will include several other cities, I believe, through June. So if there's more information, I'll be sure to pass that on. A couple of things I had from last time, and I just left it there because I think it's important. If you did attend Ignite or you didn't attend Ignite, doesn't matter. Pretty much all of the sessions are there and available for you to take a look at, even the PowerPoint decks in most cases, so you'd have some reference material. Very, very good content, not just for Azure Stack and Azure Stack Edge and all of our stuff, but pretty much everything from an Ignite perspective. And then the other thing, I think I just repeated this just for those that are customers of Azure Stack Hub. 1910 was released, I believe, 2 weeks ago. It was literally 12 hours old or something like that. It was within a day of it hitting the public website. So FYI, if you are an Azure Stack Hub customer and you manage an Azure Stack Hub scale unit. All right. So again, very quickly, why we're here, what we tend to talk about most on this call, and that is the intelligent edge. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's changed a little bit due to some announcements, as well as new features and some what we'll call family alignment changes within our portfolio of what we have from an edge solution perspective. At a high level, we have Azure Stack and the integrated systems of those systems, and really that comes down to two things. That's Azure Stack Hub. So Azure Stack Hub, formerly known as just simply Azure Stack, is essentially the integrated systems that we get from HPE and Dell and Lenovo and Cisco to bring in an Azure consistent environment down to your premises in a rack from 4 nodes all the way up to 16 with various node density and memory combined in there to bring you that experience to solve problems such as data sovereignty, laws of physics reasons around data gravity, those types of things, and being able to bring modern cloud capabilities just like we enjoy in Azure. The other thing that's interesting is in Azure IoT, which essentially is something that I normally, at least my team and the focus of what we do from an edge perspective, we have a whole other team that does IoT stuff, but that's also part of that edge story. But the other part is something that's pretty new, in that we, as of the announcements we made at Ignite, is this thing called Azure Arc. And the way I like to look at Azure Arc, and I talked about this a little bit in the last call that we had, it's really what I like to look at as connective tissue, and that Azure Arc is our way of, or what we're starting to look at as a way to provide all the wonderful Azure services that we offer within Azure, but being able to offer them, manage them, optimize them, etc. All of the good things that we get when we have things in an Azure region as a solution, but have that literally offered anywhere, on premises, even in another cloud such as Amazon or maybe Google or somewhere else. But essentially, something that allows us to do that and get all the benefits as if it were running in the Azure region. And so today, James is actually going to talk. So when we announced Arc, if you remember, if you've been to Ignite, you've seen the announcements or saw my last call, there's really kind of 3 things in this initial announcement of what Arc is that we've announced. Azure Arc, what it does for servers outside of, say, Azure regions. Azure Arc for Kubernetes outside of Azure regions. And then what I think is probably the most important and probably the most intriguing, where this gets really powerful, is Azure Arc for data services. So for there, I'll let James take it away and let him take control and talk about what this thing is and what value it's looking to bring and so forth. James?
Thanks, Kevin, and hi, everyone. So yeah, I think Kevin made a lot of really important and excellent points about where the value of Azure Arc is. And for those of you who work in Azure Stack and in other parts of the physical infrastructure around the Microsoft technology ecosystem, I want you to understand that what Azure Stack is ostensibly is software. So it is software that is designed to run anywhere, and that includes running on our stack-based offerings, whether that's Hub, Edge, or HCI. But it is not limited to that, because it is a purely like a software-based distribution and play. With that in mind, let's just make a start. In terms of the complexity of what we're trying to do and why these two things are important, is really about trying to bring a holistic view across a customer's estate, so that you can bring levels of consistency and unified management no matter where a customer has deployed applications, whether they're on-prem or in any cloud. And the reason why that is important is actually, I actually just came back from KubeCon, which was very interesting conference for apps and infra. But one of the things that becomes very clear there is that when some people talk about multi-cloud, they're really just talking about the public clouds and just being able to do that. And that's one level of complexity, but you integrate that with an on-premises environment and you've entered a new realm of complexity. You extend that out to the edge and so into other edge environments, and you add another layer of complexity and things like that. So what we're trying to do is to be inclusive of all of those environments so that you can bring and extend Azure into all of those locations, and then be able to apply Azure services on top of those in those locations to be able to both reason over that, to be able to manage that, and be able to drive new workloads in those environments, but fully managed from Azure with all of that benefit. And the reason why that's important is because once you have that in play, then you can have a consistent way of dealing with all of your assets. You have a consistent inventory across all of your assets, and then you can start to kind of reason, rationalize, and optimize for a customer. So when we think about Azure Arc, I think of it as kind of like some key kind of tenets that is really what I've just been kind of alluding to. One of those is the technologies that extend Azure management into and across all of your environments for holistic management. The other thing is around adopting cloud best practices and bringing those into on-premises environments. And that actually works on two levels. One at the kind of infra level, around, say, cloud command and control for something like RBAC and policy. But you can also think about it in terms of how we think about the workloads that we run, data workloads, even in Azure, right? So we always talk about things like separation of compute and storage and things like that. And the way we think about data services, we want to better bring a lot of that value and benefit into those environments. So it's not just a question of managing those environments, but actually helping customers even modernize what they have on premises or in other clouds, and get some of those advantages down in their environments as well. And then the last one there is obviously security. We think about security and take that very, very seriously at Microsoft. The data services team is very focused on security and would lay claim to having the most secure data platform out there in the market. But we want to, again, extend that so that it's not just about an Azure thing or just a SQL thing. It's about data services anywhere, and applying that same consistent security layer anywhere. So when you think about Azure, think about Azure Arc, think about it as software that extends Azure in and enabling services to run on premises, in other clouds, and at the edge. As we talked about, there were, and Kevin alluded to, there are three kind of key aspects: organization and governance across your environments, the at-scale Kubernetes app management, and run data services anywhere. And the key part here, I just want to make sure you understand, is that as Azure Arc is an umbrella for all three of these pillars, Azure Data Services is not just about the database itself, but it's actually about maintaining inventory in Azure for your data services. So every database, every server that was deployed in Azure, every SQL instance would be registered in Azure for inventory. And then also you can apply things like RBAC and policy from Azure to those on-premises environments. So the organize and govern across environments is just as important for data services as it is for a server or anything else. And then the at-scale Kubernetes app management, providing kind of like those DevOps techniques for managing the environment in what we call like day two operations in a consistent way, using a GitOps style pattern for applying policies to environments. That's incredibly important for being able to kind of bring Kubernetes under active management. But again, Azure Data Services, as you're going to see in a second, is also running on Kubernetes. And so there's a relationship there as well between what we're doing with at-scale Kubernetes app management and the data services. So you think of it as complementary pillars that are pulling together to provide a very, very compelling and coherent experience for our customers. Now, within Azure Data Services Anywhere, we think about this in terms of 5 tenets. We have the always current aspect. The first one is the fact that actually what you'll see is we're bringing Azure Data Services. So what does that mean? It means that we're going to take some of that benefit that we have here in Azure with SQL DB. For example, the fact that customer doesn't have to worry about patching that environment, and they don't have to worry about that environment going out of support or anything like that. And we're going to bring those capabilities on-prem and into these other into other clouds. What does that also mean? Is it means that those environments we recognize, if you like, that those environments are customer managed, and so they will come with additional control. So you'll be able to apply your own policies to and manage the actual deployment of those updates on schedules that you are able to control yourselves. And that's where we think about this as like evergreen instances or evergreen databases, is because they're always available to be up to date. They're not going to fall out of support, and you'll have your own way of controlling where and when these deployments happen. Now, in terms of hyperscale, we will also be bringing the hyperscale technology into Azure Arc for Azure Data Services. And the first time you'll see that, as you'll see in a second, is with Postgres Hyperscale. So that's one of the first services that we'll bring, and that moves us also nicely into elastic scaling. As I said before, the cloud brings many, many benefits, and we have seen people changing and transforming how data services run in the cloud, and we're going to bring that elasticity, scaling up and scaling out, capability on demand into customers' environments. I can tell you, like, for us, like deploying a SQL instance is an operation that takes seconds to run, running based off of a containerized solution. It is also a unified management experience because we have any instances that we create. We also enable inventory records. We're actually creating Azure Resource IDs under the hood automatically as part of the provisioning process, and enabling that to be pushed up into Azure. But one of the things that's interesting about the Azure Data Services is that we actually also enable localized monitoring and localized log collection to be able to provide a more complete service in the local environment on that local cluster. You can even deploy this in a disconnected manner, so that even if there is no connectivity to Azure for any period of time, you're still able to get the benefit. You're still able to see real-time log collection and monitoring. In general, our data services are designed to run in a multi-cloud capability, because we're taking advantage of Kubernetes to do it, right? So we can layer on top of any kind of upstream Kubernetes flavor. So in terms of security, we are bringing Azure Data Services capabilities here. So you will know that in SQL DB, for example, you have things like advanced data security, which brings or data classification, advanced threat detection, and vulnerability assessments, bringing those in, as well as you can see there, that those policies and RBAC from the app management part of Kubernetes, all part of the package. And then lastly, one of the things that is customers love about Azure is, you pay for what you consume, and you pay on demand, and you moving your business from a CapEx-based model into an OpEx-based consumption model, and the cloud provides that. But the other thing the cloud does is it actually provides you with a unified management experience for your consumption. And so that's another big part of how this will transform how people will not only build data services, but also how they consume them, how they actually pay for them as well. And because we are targeting this to run on any hardware, we will be obviously working with hardware partners, and we do actively work with the Stack team in particular. But and we work across the major Kubernetes distros. We are targeting this to land anywhere as a data services platform. Now, what we have in private preview that we announced at Ignite is we have hyperscale from Postgres. So we have the scale out OLTP. So we're bringing a very differentiated Postgres experience out of the cloud and into all of these different environments. And we are also bringing Azure SQL Database for Azure Arc. And in particular, we are bringing the managed instance capability. So the unit is an instance or a server from that point of view, if you can think about it like that. So you will be able to have multiple databases on a single instance. And they're the only two that we're talking about publicly right now. But obviously, there are other data services coming in, as much as there are also other Azure services that are also going to be landing on Azure Arc as we go through this journey. But just to kind of give you a couple of give you a kind of like a layer cake view of how this kind of all stands up, is it you will be able to have your hardware. We will obviously be providing like reference architecture guidance for customers that want to kind of roll their own and or use any of the kind of major cloud options, as well as deploying on Azure Stack. And then you pick your Kubernetes distro. And on top of that, we then deploy something called the Azure Arc data controller. And I'll show you a more detailed diagram of that in a second. From that controller, we can then provision instances of Postgres and SQL, and other engines will come in the future. And then people can then use Kubernetes applications or connect from other applications into those data services. And that's really a big part of why data services is very interesting for people, is because stateful applications, especially databases, has always been known to be challenging on Kubernetes because that was not its original mandate. But that doesn't mean to say that we can't do it. And our team at Microsoft has invested very heavily into being able to deliver that capability. So just to give you a bit more of a view of how this lays out as far as a customer is concerned, you have your Kubernetes cluster, and Kubernetes exposes an API and a CLI, a client library called kubectl or kubectl or kubecontrol. I've heard all manner of sayings for how people talk about that. I just think of it as kubectl. And from there, you can deploy using our CLI that sits on top and is like a wrapper for kubectl called AZData. And AZData will provision what's called the Azure Arc Data Controller, and we connect directly to that controller API. And the reason why that's important is because the connectivity is direct. It's not going up through the cloud and back down. We can obviously deploy from Azure down onto a Kubernetes cluster, but the key part here is that the interactions are local. You don't need to always be connected to Azure in order to be able to deploy data services, which is very, very important, especially if you were trying to manage that estate. That controller has baked into it a level of capability that incorporates localized monitoring, localized log collection, as well as enabling a bunch of functionality. It also handles things like automated patching and the integration with the Microsoft Container Registry. Now, because we are a cross-platform team and we are we care deeply about consistency of experience, both in the API land and in user experience. We use Azure Data Studio as a client-side experience because A, it is cross-platform, and B, because we can bring a symmetry of experience between how you would provision and deploy in Azure Data Studio or through the Azure portal. In the future, as you get into the preview, you'll be able to see that you'll be able to go into the Azure portal and target this Kubernetes cluster, even though it's running on premises, and then provision a data, either of the data services directly into that Kubernetes environment. So with all of that said, how do you get started? Well, I would suggest you go over and have a read through the Azure Arc Services page. From there, there is a little button that will take you through to a private preview sign-up form. It is important to note that Azure Arc for Servers is currently in public preview. You can go and use all of that stuff today, and I thoroughly encourage you to do that as part of the start of your journey. For those of you who are interested in the Kubernetes part or in the data services part, then please sign up for the private preview, and we will reach out as and when we can. I can tell you, on the receiving end of that fire hose, the response I've seen personally has been pretty unprecedented, and I've sat across some pretty major announcements at Microsoft in my time here. I've not seen anything like this. So bear with us. We are working through it. We'll get to these as quickly as we can. But I just wanted to say thank you to Kevin for inviting me on to his show, and thank you all for taking the time to share 30 minutes with me this morning.
Thanks, James. Yep, thanks. And yeah, I don't know if it's completely my show, but I was thinking about naming it the Kevin Sullivan Show, but I don't think anybody would want to show up to that. So anyway. So here we are. So thanks again. Yeah, it's great stuff. And I too am, like everybody else, anxiously awaiting this thing to hit a preview, something I can get my hands on, because I have been through the Azure Arc for Servers is pretty good. It is awesome too, and it is out there. So and that is something anybody can take a look at if you go to the links that James showed up there. Okay, so we're at time. I appreciate all of you guys showing up to this call. Just to tell you that next, and like everything, all good things have to come to an end. The next and final call for at least the calendar year, I'm going to take a little hiatus and maybe look at see what we can do for start of the next calendar year. But the last one in this series will be a week from today, from Friday, same time, 11 a.m. U.S. Central. Topic TBD, but I have a feeling it will also probably be around this Azure Arc thing. Just still trying to work out the details, and I'll post that when we can at that AKS link that you see there. And with that, I will let everybody go back to their day. Have a good rest of your Friday, and have a good weekend. Thank you.